President Cyril Ramaphosa says the fighting in Sudan is hampering efforts to evacuate stranded South Africans. Government says about 77 South Africans are trapped in the conflict-ravaged country. As fighting continues, so far more than 400 people have been killed since the conflict started 2 weeks ago. The 72-hour ceasefire between the warring factions failed to hold, raising fears of a full-scale civil war.
We're hoping that the window of the ceasefire will hold so that we are able to execute the evacuation process. So that will be underway. And we have also agreed that we will also assist other nationals in our region who are stranded there. So there are some nationals from 1 or 2 countries in our region who we will also be assisting as we bring the number of South Africans back home.
Well, the United States has deployed a team of disaster response experts to provide humanitarian assistance in Sudan as the conflict enters its second week. The disaster assistance response team will operate out of Kenya for the initial phase of the deployment. Officials say the experts are working with the international community to identify priority needs and deliver urgent humanitarian assistance. The military of the United States has evacuated all its government workers from the capital, Khartoum. We're now joined for more on the situation in the East African nation by international relations expert Brooks Spector and take a look at evacuations and situations of conflict. Thank you very much, Brooks, for your time this afternoon. What have you made of the way the evacuations have been handled, also given that the country is essentially closed? With this passage of several hundreds of people, what does it tell us?
Have a good afternoon. Part of the problem, of course, is that there are quite a few foreigners in Sudan, and they're not simply near neighbors. I mean, there were and still are substantial Americans, most of whom are not government employees. They may have been working with aid agencies, or they may have dual citizenship, or they may be married or the dependents of Sudanese but American citizens. And they, of course, are not part of this evacuation at this point. And that's probably the case with other nations, the French, the British, and so forth. And the UN itself has been really hard done by to get its personnel out as well. There was a motorcade leaving Sudan's capital for the UN, and it came under some fire, although no one was killed in that process. The real challenge is that it's absolutely unclear how the political military situation in Sudan is going to be resolved. There are 2 major factions. The commander of the formal Sudanese armed forces, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, but then the second person, General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, usually called by most people Hemeti, and he is in charge of the rapid support forces. Now, the two generals were instrumental in the removal of Omar al-Bashir a few years back. And they had pledged to lead to the democratic transition, but that seems to have pretty much evaporated. And now there is artillery fire, there's small arms fire, food supplies have wound down to virtually nothing. Electricity is in trouble, and so forth. And it is possible, although no one knows, that a fair number of other militias, which are plentiful, sadly, in Sudan, may join one side or another, or simply just take advantage of the general chaos. And then there is also the reported supplying of weapons. I say reported because I don't certainly have, from this point, this position, have any verified data on it. The Wagner group, that Russian military mercenary force, through an intermediary in one of the Libyan factions, has been supplying weapons to the rapid support forces of Hemeti, which adds even further danger and confusion to the situation. Now, just one other note, if I might. Many countries, notably the United Arab Emirates and Russia and a few others, have been particularly interested in Sudanese mineral resources. And there is the fact that Sudan, as a large country, borders on, I think it's 6 countries in East Africa, and any breakdown in civil order in Sudan can have a spillover effect into the others because of the flow of refugees or fighting or whatever.
Brooks, when it comes to the evacuation of persons, the United States taking their top officials, what of ordinary Sudanese that would like to also escape, and they acknowledge just as much that their situation is quite desperate? We appreciate that every country has to look after the interest of its citizens first, but to your point that, this is a country with a lot of wealth to offer, its people is one of them.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of the problem, of course, is there's no easy way to get to a place from Khartoum, certainly. A lot of it's dry, dusty land. Transportation lines are not straightforward. Either you have to get through Ethiopia, or you have to go to cities on the Red Sea coast that are not yet affected by it, or you have to go into Egypt following the course of the Nile River. And none of those avenues, or perhaps going southward towards South Sudan and Kenya, but those are equally difficult. There's no easy way to evacuate thousands of people out of Khartoum and surrounding areas, and there's no simple way to process all those people if they do succeed in getting out, which is one reason why that humanitarian relief team that you mentioned right at the beginning from the U.S. is already in place in Kenya to figure out, in coordination with others, what kind of relief effort might be possible. But one should not really, at this point, expect seeing huge hordes of airplanes landing in Khartoum to evacuate people, if for no other reason that the airport's inoperable.
Brooks Spector, International Relations Expert, thank you very much for your time this afternoon.